Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, reconditioning an old spokeshave. So today I'll be reconditioning this old beater Stanley 151 spokeshave. A spokeshave is basically a variant of a plane, but instead of having a long body and a long sole that is for flattening things, the spokeshave has a very skinny little short sole and a couple of handles so that you can push it forward on very thin round stock. Now, spokeshaves, as the name implies, were made for shaving rounded forms like carriage and wagon wheel spokes, spindles for chairs, things of that nature. You know, you can buy used tools on eBay pretty cheaply, and reconditioning them can really be a fun project. In this case, probably took me, basically a long afternoon to get this done. And, when you do reconditioning of a tool like this, you have to take it all apart. You really get to know how it all functions, and I think it helps you actually use the tools better. Alright, let's jump right on in. First, I'll take the spokeshave apart and reserve the extra parts. I learned long ago that when you take stuff apart, not losing all the little dinky parts is about 37% of the battle. Plastic bags often get holes in them, so I'm just taping the crap out of this stuff and hopefully it'll all stay together and I won't lose it. Now I'll take the spokeshave to my abrasive blaster and scour all the rust off. Pretty much impossible to film inside a blaster, so trust me that I'm not just pretending. And here's how it comes out. Now, the original had some sort of industrial enamel coating. I could just paint it with Rust-Oleum from Home Depot, but instead I'll use an ultra-durable firearms coating, Cerakote, which will last about 1,000,000 times longer than enamel paint. Is this necessary? Absolutely not. So why am I doing it? Because I'm an uncompromising master woodworker, the sort of guy who sharpens all his chisels to 30,000 grit and, no, not that guy. I'm just doing it because I feel like it, which is pretty much the only good reason for doing anything in life. Now, I won't go into absurd detail about Cerakote, but basically you need a really clean, oil-free surface to get a good bond, which we have here. I'll mask off the parts where I don't want Cerakote to adhere to the surface. Then I'll mix the hardener and the Cerakote at an 18:1 ratio. Or at least I'm pouring it into a measuring device and making some vague attempt to get 18:1. Now with Cerakote, if the ratio is off a hair, it's not going to ruin the durability of the coating. It just results in a more or less shiny surface. Once it's all mixed up, I'll spray it on. And put it in my heat treating oven for 1 hour at 300 degrees Fahrenheit to cure. There it is, looking all cool and industrial using a color that Cerakote calls concrete. Next we'll be working on the bottom or sole of the spokeshave. I bought this old spokeshave on eBay, and even though it's pretty old and beat up looking, I suspect that it's barely been used. The bottom still shows evidence of being milled flat with the original tool marks very clear, not blurred out like it's been used a lot. So I'll set up some 220 grit sandpaper on my machinist's block. You could just use masonite or glass or any other reasonably true surface. So first I'll remove all the old milling marks. It's good practice when flattening anything to use a figure-8 motion. If you just go in one direction, you'll tend to get wear on one side, and often that'll cause the surface that you're trying to flatten to actually get curved or to blur out on the edges. This cast iron body is really easy to sand. As a knife maker, I'm used to using tool steel all the time, so this stuff just feels like butter. When I get rid of all the old machining marks, I'll move to 600 grit wet or dry sandpaper. Now I've got this nice and flat, so with the 600 I'm going to switch to a side-to-side motion. That's just so that I can see that all the previous scratch marks are finished. I'm only going to do this on my final pass. And there it is, all pretty and clean. Now look, could we have just cleaned off the rust and let it be? Sure, but half the fun of restoring a tool is making it look really nice. Moreover, having really smooth surfaces like this on planes helps the tool glide over the wood with less resistance, giving me cleaner, more controlled cuts. Or that's what I tell myself to justify all this tedious work. The cap iron that came with this Spokeshave was in pretty good shape. I'll remove the light coating of rust with my belt grinder. I could do this by hand, of course. It'd be quite easy in the stage that it's in. I'll take it all the way to my 65 micron belt, which will make it nice and shiny and purty. Now we'll turn to the iron, that is the blade itself. This is the original Stanley. Again, very little evidence of use with very crisp machining marks on the working side of the blade. Just for kicks, I took the iron to my hardness tester, which revealed that the plane is actually differentially hardened. The body barely registers on the Rockwell C-scale, that's the black numbers here, while the edge has been hardened to a relatively stout 61 Rockwell. Again, I'll get rid of the machining marks using more or less the same procedure as I did on the Spokeshave bottom. In this case, though, I'll attach the iron to a block of mahogany with transfer tape, making it much easier to manipulate. This is 3M 950 transfer tape. 30 bucks a roll, and when you really need it, worth every cent. The hardness of the iron makes this a much slower process than flattening the cast iron bottom. Here I'm busily pretending to do it all by hand while sneaking off camera to speed things up a hair on my belt grinder. But if you're doing something like this yourself, it's very doable to get it all done by hand. It just takes a little bit longer. Now this time I'll finish up for real by hand on 2000 grit sandpaper. Now you're ready to sharpen. Just do it using your favorite method, whatever it is. If you want to take it up to 30,000 grit on your Japanese water stones, don't let me stop you. Now I'm doing it on sandpaper, which will result in a somewhat crappier edge than your $2,000 natural Japanese stone, but it's still pretty darn sharp. Now check this out, this is pretty cool. What you'll notice is that there's a dark part and a light part on this blade. This shows the demarcation between the Rockwell 61 edge and the softer body of the iron. This is exactly the same as what you'd find on a traditionally made Japanese sword, the phenomenon known as a hamon. You could etch this and make it really stand out, and well, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you could. So, let's put it all back together. I burnished up the faces of the adjustment screws off camera. Ooh, shiny. Now when you're setting this up, the slotted screw is not meant to be torqued down. It's just for retention and should have just enough play so that you can slide that iron in and then slide it up and down and adjust it. The finger screw at the top is the one that's actually used to tighten the blade into the final position. And of course the two adjustment screws on the top are used to move the blade up and down. So after all of that, does it work? Sure. Here I'm using it conventionally as a push tool. Now I tend to use Japanese planes myself, which work on the pull stroke, so I'm showing here that it can actually be used on the pull stroke too. Works great that way. So we're shaving this little piece of mahogany to a nice round shape. It's got nice surface feel, tool's easy to use, terrific. So fun project, not too complicated. I might make a heavier blade for this spoke shave at some point. And also, recently I did a video about turning tool handles on a lathe. But, everybody doesn't have a lathe, so I was thinking it'd be fun to use this tool to make a lathe-free tool handle. Good lathe, of course, costs a couple grand. This, $11 on eBay. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.